Stop hoping for your business to grow and start mastering the formula for success that every entrepreneur needs to grow their business. Join us for 5+1 Mastery, where every week we go in depth on how to grow your business the right way. Learn more at 5+1mastery.com.
So one of the things that I have figured out over the years is that most of the advice going around about hiring other people is terrible advice. So, for example, the advice that I hear most common is hire someone to do something you don't know how to do.
Right.
And I think that's the worst advice, and I see it all the time. Like, this is terrible advice. You're already working 50 hours a week.
Yeah.
You hire someone to do something you don't know how to do. Now you're working 60 hours a week, and you're
Right.
not managing it very well, and you're not managing what you're currently doing very well.
I'm your host, Chaz Wilson. I bring you successful entrepreneurs, add valuable wisdom to your journey, and help you succeed. Welcome to Connect, Share, and Prosper.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Connect, Share, Prosper. I'm your host, Chaz Wilson. We are joined today with John Jonas. Sorry, I almost said John Jonas. That's a tongue twister for me this morning. John Jonas has helped thousands of entrepreneurs succeed in their business by doing outsourcing differently. You guys listen to this. He created the world's largest website for finding Filipino virtual assistants with onlinejobs.ph, which now has over 1 million Filipino resumes and over 100,000 employers from around the world using it. And John is an entrepreneur who's not just dreaming of changing hundreds of thousands of lives, but he's actually doing it. So help me welcome to this episode, Connect, Share, Prosper, John Jonas. John, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So first of all, I'd love to know, in being an entrepreneur, it's about seeing opportunities, seeing challenges and problems that need to be solved. How did you see this challenge, this problem, and know to jump in and solve this challenge?
I didn't.
Okay.
So I was hiring people myself
Yeah.
in the Philippines, and it was amazing. And I had so many people asking, how are you doing this? How are you doing this? How are you doing this? And as I started to teach it a little bit, finding people just was crappy. Like the only way was through an agency. So you go to them and they tell you, oh, here's your person. And I was paying them $750 a month. They were paying the worker $250. And like they gave me two options. What kind of a worker do you want? Do you want a webmaster or do you want a programmer? Like, well, I don't want either of those.
Right.
Well, do you want a webmaster or a programmer? No, like that was the only option I had. So at some point I was like, I think I could do this a little bit differently. And I was trying to recruit someone myself. And I thought if I build this job board kind of thingy, maybe I'll get a couple hundred resumes in it, and then I could recruit myself.
Oh, brilliant.
And I got
so
a
it was
couple
to
hundred
solve your
resumes.
own problem, not necessarily somebody else's problem at the time.
Right. So it was my own. I got a couple hundred resumes in the first month and was like, well, sweet. And then I found the person I was looking for, and then it just kept growing.
So it wasn't that you said, okay, I solved my problem, done, I'm moving on. It just kept going. You're like, wow, this is something that others could probably find benefit in.
Well, somewhat. So like the Filipinos kept joining and employers kept finding it. And I kind of ignored it for a couple of years.
Wow,
while I was
really?
doing other stuff. Yeah. And one day I looked at it and was like, yeah, there's over 100,000 Filipino resumes here. And there's a lot of employers. I should probably do something about this thing.
Okay, so wait, hold on. I just I got to fill in a couple blanks for myself here, a couple gaps. So you had this platform that you built to solve your own issue, and you let it sit for a couple of years, and you kind of look back in it, and you got all these people using it, and they were finding it organically.
Well, so the Filipinos were finding it organically. I never did a dang thing to market it in the Philippines.
Wow.
To employers around the world, I was teaching how to hire Filipinos because that's what people were demanding it from me. Like I had people coming to me all the time saying, hey, teach my audience, right?
Yeah.
And so I would talk about it, but I was also running other businesses that, other online things that I'm not doing anymore, but that's where most of my time was spent. So.
Wow. And so your main thing now is this? This is what
this is my main thing now. I mean, I realized like, oh, dang, this thing's growing like crazy and it's really awesome. So is what
Okay,
I'm
so
focused
we'll
on.
come back to this the business in just a second, but let's back up now that kind of people have a context a little bit about what you're doing and how it's working. Because I want to get to the business model itself a little bit. That'll be interesting to discuss with you. But this idea for people, a lot of people listening in my, you can see my shameless plug here on here for my book, 5+1. In 5+1, the 5 business disciplines, we talk about the 5th discipline is team building, how every entrepreneur really needs to add leverage to their life and add somebody on their team. And typically that first hire should be some sort of assistant, whether it be virtual or whatever. So first of all, what's your thoughts on that as far as leverage and why people need that help? And number 2, I kind of want to dive into what some of these myths are that, especially that I sometimes hear when people talk about, well, if I hire overseas, especially, break down some of those thoughts they might have about hiring, say, Filipino for virtual assistant.
So one of the things that I have figured out over the years is that most of the advice going around about hiring other people is terrible advice.
Like what?
So, for example, the advice that I hear most common is hire someone to do something you don't know how to do.
Right.
And I think that's the worst advice, and I see it all the time. I saw Gary Vaynerchuk give it the other day.
Yeah.
Like, this is terrible advice. You're already working 50 hours a week.
Yeah.
You hire someone to do something you don't know how to do. Now you're working 60 hours a week, and you're
Right.
not managing it very well, and you're not managing what you're currently doing very well, right?
Right.
So I love what you say, hire a virtual assistant. Hire someone to get something off of your plate.
Yes.
And get something that you are currently doing done. And so when people complain about, overseas, they're not that good, well, probably, first of all, they started with India. That's the first problem. And not that they're not good, because they are.
Yep.
It just, the communication issues between the Western culture and India is really, really hard.
Okay.
And the Philippines, that's not the case. It's a completely different story with the Philippines. And the world has kind of woken up to that over the last 10 years. I've watched the world's outsourcing shift. And so, like, if you want to talk about like what kind of work can get done, I'll tell you a quick story.
Yeah.
So this is 13 years ago. My wife is 7 months pregnant with our 3rd child. And she goes into the doctor's office and he has run some tests. He says to her, "You have preeclampsia. And if you don't go on strict bed rest for the next 3 to 5 weeks, you're going to lose this baby." And I was with her, and my thought at the time was, I'm not about to lose a baby over money. And I'm currently, I was currently working 40, 50 hours a week. And I thought, I have to not work for the next 2 months, basically. And so when I got home, I sent an email to 2 guys I had in the Philippines with me. And they had been working with me for like 18 months or so. And so I don't want anybody to think that like I pulled these guys off the street and this is what happened. But
Sure.
I had them doing menial work, and because I thought this thing, like they can't do really good work, right? So I told them my situation, and I told them, I need you guys to take over everything I'm currently doing. And I had spent a lot of time training them and working with them, right? For the next 3 weeks, my wife goes on strict bed rest. I have 2 other kids that I have to take care of, and I worked 1 hour for the next 3 weeks.
Wow.
My wife has the baby 3 weeks later, a healthy, beautiful little girl. And for the next 2 months, I worked an hour a week. And so that was 3 months away from my business. Come back and find my business is in the same spot it was before. They have managed things. They've run things. They did so much thinking work that I never thought was possible. And I learned like, oh, dang, these guys are capable of doing our marketing, of maintaining my blog and doing comments and
Wow.
forum posting and running my Google AdWords campaigns and some social media that we had. And like, there was all kinds of stuff that they just took over. And I never went back to doing those things.
Wow. So it opened up your mind because you had to, right? I think that's sometimes necessity, right? It bred this opportunity for you to look at things maybe you hadn't quite. Yeah, you were helping them, right? These weren't just guys you just brought in. They kind of had an idea of what you were doing, but you gave them more. I love what you said about not just hiring people to do what either you don't want to do or you don't know how to do, but really taking off tasks. We always talk about what's an income producing activity that I have to keep, but everything else even if I know how to do it, especially if I know how to do it, can I leverage that out to someone else so I can continue to focus on bringing cash into the business? And here you were with a situation where you needed to.
I was forced. I mean, I was lucky that I was forced into it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it taught me like, oh, dude, there's always work to be done in the business.
Yeah.
It's a matter. You want to live the lifestyle that you see that other people pretend that they're living.
Yeah.
Or you see the 4-hour work week. You want to live that lifestyle. I was living it. And I realized like, oh, this is how you get other people to do your work. You teach them well. You spend time. You invest in them. And one of the great things about the Philippines is they're loyal almost to a fault. Where like those two guys still work for me today. The first person I ever hired, which was in 2005, still works for me today.
Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah.
So help me understand something. So I'm so intrigued by this, and so this feels selfish, like these questions I'm going to ask. And it's selfish because, I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs, coach a lot of people that watch this podcast who are in the space right now where they know, like internally they know they need to hire help. Like they're at that stage. It's probably way beyond that stage. And the necessity of doing it hasn't quite shown up the way it did for you. So what are some of the things you hear that hold people back from making this leap that you could share as wisdom to these entrepreneurs to help them sort of ease their mind about taking this step and hiring somebody, especially overseas?
So I think often people just don't know what's possible. Like, and that's, so you don't know what's possible. You don't know how to find someone good, right? And those are probably the two most common things. I worry that I'm not going to find someone good. And then when people know that they can find that the talent is out there, you worry. And probably just like I did, like when I found out about this, I had someone give me advice like, hey, make sure you go to the Philippines when you're ready to start outsourcing some of this stuff. And he gave me a reference to that agency, and I didn't do it for a couple months because I was like, I don't know if I can keep someone busy full time, because that was the condition. Like, you had to hire someone full time. I don't know if I can afford this. I don't know if they can do good work. And finally, and this is the advice that I give people now, is none of that matters.
Right.
Because I can't keep doing what I'm currently doing.
Right.
Like this, I can't keep working 50 hours a week forever. Like it doesn't work.
Right.
And then there's only so much time in the day to get stuff done, and I'm not getting it done.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I always find there's an interesting multiple when you look at business growth. Like you could dissect many businesses in this, and I'll just use my own for the example because most people listening know of Master Networks and what we do. You could almost look at it and say, well, as Master Networks grew, we added more people. I actually think it's the other way. We added more people, which is why we grew. And so if you're stuck, like the question isn't how do you work harder, it's who do you get to help you?
Right. And I not that I think that, oh, you add more people, you're going to grow more, so like go add 10 people.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for clarifying.
But and here's what I saw in my own life. I added someone to do, and this is what I always tell people about, like, how do you know when you're ready? When you have something that you know how to do that you could teach someone else to do. So maybe you're doing it, maybe you're not doing it. When I did it, it was something that I knew how to do and I knew I should do. I hated doing it, which was writing content and publishing it. I hate it. And so I hired someone else to do that for me, and it took that task off of my plate first of all.
So writing and publishing content was that was the first task.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there was a specific process that I had that I wanted to follow, and that I couldn't teach a contract worker, someone who was like on a per project basis, or someone who was going to be there hourly for the next 2 months, but then they were going to be gone, right? Like this is something that we had to do for long term, and someone needed to follow through on it, right?
Yep.
So when you know that there's something that you know how to do that you can teach someone else, you're ready to hire someone. Perfect. And then what I found was I got this thing off of my plate, so I'm not doing it, so it's not my time anymore. And then two, and this is a really big one that it took me a long time to recognize, mentally that thing was holding me up. Like there was a lot of mental effort in both guilt of not doing something, because I know I should be doing this, but I'm not doing it because there's not time, and that it drives guilt, right? And that guilt is holding you back. And then the fact that I'm thinking about it and worrying about it, like, oh, I should be doing this thing and I'm not, also creates this mental problem. And once those once those two things went away, I found I was so dang productive at other more important things like how to make sales.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's what drives a business, is making sales. And
yes,
I got other things off my plate, then I could figure out how to make sales. And then once I had figured that out, then I can offload that piece of it. And I offloaded the programming piece of it to someone else. And, this was definitely not an overnight thing. This is a long-term team building thing that really, I've worked 17 hours a week now for like 12 years.
Good for you, man. That's awesome. So help me understand, because you talked about now a little bit where you are. So how many people do you have, working for you right now?
So I have 26 people in the Philippines.
That's great.
I have a business partner here in the U.S., and I have a girl in the U.S. who does some writing for me. She writes really well in my voice.
Okay, so guys, listen to this. So he's got a partner here. He's got someone else here who's writing for him, and then 26 employees in the Philippines. How do you coordinate those 26 people together, first of all? What do you do to do that?
So some of them my partner manages, and then the only thing that I do in the business is manage those people and their tasks. So every day, the only thing that I do is I respond to what they're doing, either in email or in a project management system, and then I look at problems that we have and I think of solutions. Like, here's this thing that's going wrong, and here's what I think we should do to solve this thing. And I'll ask specific people that are involved in that part of the business, what do you guys think about this? Get their feedback, and then I'll formulate a final solution. Like, okay, here's what we're going to do. I want you to do this, and I want you to do this. Right? And I make assignments. And
so, first of all, it's awesome. Congratulations, because you're doing you're living what a lot of people talk about, but you've been able to structure it in a way that works really well. I'm gonna ask you a couple questions that I'm sort of already superimposing what I think some of my audience would like. I'm trying to think through their lenses of what they would think, right? So,
yeah, great.
Answer the thoughts about time difference. How do you manage that with people who are, with the time difference, and are there any communication challenges? And what about the hiring process? If they're not working out, how easy is it to make a change? Those kinds of sort of logistical things. What's been your experience?
Yeah. Okay. So the time difference. So like we have customer support people that work 24/7. Like we have five customer support people. They each work a different shift. They overlap slightly so that we cover 24/7, right? So you can find people that work at night if you need that. And what I recommend when you do that is you find people who are already used to working at night. Don't take someone who's on the day shift normally and then make them a night shift so that they're on your time zone. It's really, really hard for them. Aside from that, one of the things that I found that I immediately loved when I started doing this was I can do my work during the day uninterrupted, and then I assign tasks. And then I go to sleep, and when I get up in the morning, tasks are done.
So good.
And so things have moved forward at night. And then usually I found that there's a little bit of overlap either in the morning or the evening, because they end up working their own schedules, and some of them are morning people and some of them are night people. And so usually I'll find like, oh, you're online at this time, or you're online at this time, morning or night. So I have a little bit of overlap where I can talk to them if I want to.
Yeah, so good.
So you next talked about communication issues. So with the Philippines, the number one problem that people have is culturally, they say that they are shy. They say shy. And what that really means is they don't like to be embarrassed, or they don't like to disappoint. As a culture, they don't like to disappoint you. And so if they feel like they're going to disappoint you, or you're going to be disappointed in something of theirs, they would rather disappear than tell you. And so the difference here is in other cultures, they'll say yes. Like this is where you're a yes man, right? How's the project going? Yes. Are you working on it? Yes. Is it going to be done on time? Yes. Even though that's not the case, right? So that's not the Philippines. So in the Philippines, what they do when there's a problem, they say nothing. And so if you have a worker that disappears, like they stop responding to you for a couple of days, they have a problem. It's not that they're lazy or they don't want the job. And so the way to solve that is to go to them and say, hey, I think you have a problem with something. You don't understand something that I told you to do, or you don't know how to do this, or you don't like it, or something like that. What's wrong? And if you'll do that, almost every time they'll respond and say, yeah, you're right, whatever it is. And they'll tell you the problem. And usually it's something you can solve, like, oh, you missed this instruction that I gave you, and I guess I wasn't very clear about it, and so let me give it to you again. That's the biggest communication issue you have.
But
so Filipinos,
that's so powerful what you just shared. Like, that's just so much wisdom, and cut the learning curve down that people would have to go through to understand that.
yeah, because I learned that the hard way.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine, right? When people just disappear and you're like, what happened? They're gone.
Right. You spend all this time recruiting someone, and you found someone good, and they disappear. And what often people think is, oh, they're just lazy. They didn't really want the job, right? That's not the case. That's not how their culture is. So in the Philippines, English is a primary language. I've only been there once. Everything I do is virtual. I was there in 2010, and I was in a hotel lobby and watching a clerk and a guest argue, both of them Filipino, arguing in English. And that was where the light bulb went off for me, like, oh, dang, like, street signs are in English, billboards are in English. It is, the people you find will have really dang good English.
That's good.
So that's that piece of it. Well, you asked 3 questions. I don't remember the third one.
I think, like, if it's not working out, how do I, like, what's the understanding there? And I guess I'm doing my own agreements and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, so the first piece of it not working out is try and solve the problem with them. Because here's the thing, you didn't go through and maybe if you go through an agency, you don't give a crap, right? Like if someone else does the recruiting for you, you don't care. And if they're not amazing, which is probably going to be more than half the time. And I know that because we recruit for people sometimes, and more than half the time it doesn't work out. When you recruit for yourself, though, you have put in effort, and you found the best person, right? And so if it's not working out, usually is a communication problem of, like, they're not understanding what you're asking them to do.
Yeah.
Your instructions aren't as clear as you think they are, which is usually the problem. And so the first step here is recognize maybe I'm the problem here, not them.
Yeah.
And approach them about it and say, like, hey, what's wrong? And try and solve the problem. Because what I see is employers who try and solve the problem first, usually they end up with a rock star worker. Like, once that person gains your trust, which this is the big deal with the Philippines, is they want to trust you. So often we go into this thinking, oh, I don't know if I can trust this person. They're on the other side of the world. They're thinking the same thing. I don't know if I can trust this employer to not embarrass me, to not be disappointed in my work. And once they gain your trust, they will go above and beyond what you've asked them to make sure it works out, right?
That's great.
Up until then, they're likely to hold back because they don't want to disappoint you, right? So gain their trust will help solve a lot of those problems. And then if it's not working, you got to let them go.
Yeah.
And it's crappy and I hate doing it, but let them go find someone else.
Tell me about the kind of last thing here on this, and then I want to talk about your business model itself. So tell me about the pay difference, like, because I hear that a lot, like, hey, if it costs me whatever $20 an hour in the US, I can maybe get it for what in the Philippines, because that tends to be a selling point on this, right?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is there's a difference in the Philippines between hourly work and salaried work. Hourly work in the Philippines is always considered temporary. And so if you're hiring someone temporarily, that's one thing. If you want someone long-term, which I think most people should hire someone long-term, that's where you'll really notice a change in your business. Pay them a salary. Whether it's full-time or part-time, it's fine. So the pay difference is, I'll just tell you what my workers make, and you'll know. So I have 26 people. They make between $450 a month and $1,700 a month. On the low end, I have like data entry people that had really no skills. I have some people in the middle who I hired, 10 or 15 years ago who had very little skills, and they were making very little. And today they make quite a bit. Like they make $800, $900, $1,000 a month because they've learned and learned and learned, and I've just given them raises, right? In the middle end, I have people that write really good English, people that manage social media, people that write content. I have customer service people. I have an HR person I have people that do website work. On the upper end, I have like people that are good at managing Facebook ads or high-end programmers or high-end designers. I also like those would be senior, and I have junior levels of each of those things, right? And so, like you have a programmer in the U.S. that costs you $100,000 a year. In the Philippines, they cost you $1,000 a month.
Wow. Yeah. So, again, I'm trying to put myself in the listener's shoe today. So then, it's $100,000. Why isn't somebody doing this? Why are they not
doing what?
Making that move to go to get somebody in the Philippines?
They don't know. Usually, that's what it is. You don't know.
Okay.
Like people have no idea.
It's just awareness. It's
awareness. They're so dang good, and I can tell you story after story after story of things that my team did that you'd be like, oh, I never thought people outsourcing could do that, right? And then once you realize, oh, now you know that you can, and then you know where. Then the other side of it is like, how do you find these people, right? And
the reality is, you're not. I think again, I'm thinking of people listening. I mean, in this case, I don't know all of their circumstances, of course, but you're not. Some might argue, well, gosh, it feels like I'm taking advantage, but you're giving them opportunity they don't have, right?
Yeah, you'll immediately get rid of that thought. If you go try this, that thought will go away immediately as they thank you every single day for giving them a job.
Wow.
And the Philippines they call it an emerging economy. They don't like to call it third world, but it's hard to find a full-time job, a long-term stable job in the Philippines. So, yeah.
So tell me about your business model now. So you've got all the 26 people. You've got your partner. How do you monetize it? Just help our people understand what you do and how you've built that model.
So onlinejobs.ph is a job board. Basically, like you go on and you post your job, and people reply to your job, and you can do that for free. People apply to your job, I guess, or you can go on and look at resumes and sort through them and find like, oh, I'm looking for a social media manager. Oh my gosh, here's 200 people with social media experience, and this person also knows SEO and whatever else, right? So in order to contact people and start interviewing them, employers pay $70.
Wow.
And then you can talk to all the people you want. Everybody who applied to your job, you can reply to them and start to interview them. And then, so that's how we monetize it, is employers pay to basically access the database. Then when you're done, you'll cancel and you're on your own with that person. Like they don't work for us. You don't pay us, and
not
we
an
pay
agency.
them.
You're the job board.
Yeah, we're a job board. We're not an agency. So we don't have offices in the Philippines. They're going to work from home. They have their own computers and internet access, so you're not paying for any of that. You don't pay for utilities or insurance or whatever. And so you pay them what they want to make, and we're not taking a cut or whatever.
Wow, it's awesome. Man, John, this has been like mind-blowing for me because it's something we've talked about internally for a long time of a way to expand. And again, I'm just trying to sit here and go, why haven't we? I don't even know the answer. Just again, it's not even been on our. While we've heard of it, it's not been in our discussion, our radar of something we would consider.
Often, I think it takes people like, you got to hear some stories, right?
Right.
Or like, here's some examples of things that other people do. Like, let's talk about editing a podcast.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I got someone in the Philippines that does that for me. Or video editing. Or you need graphics design. I have people that are on my staff that do all these things, or answer customers support, or all these things that.
Man, incredible. Yeah. How can people? So again, the website is onlinejobs.ph. Do you do any speaking? Have you written any books or anything like that on what your topic here?
So I've done a lot of speaking. Like I've done a lot of speaking on stage. I've spoke around the world about this. I just released a book called The Outsourcing Lever, and I'm actually giving it away for free. I bought a whole bunch of copies of it, and I will ship it to you at outsourcinglever.com. And it covers what we've talked about today and so much more. And if people if people want more from me, I'm available through email. I don't like social media. I feel like it wastes my time. I never get on. I have people that do all of our social media.
Yeah.
But through email, I'm super available. So if you use the contact us link at any of my websites, onlinejobs.ph or outsourcing lever or onevaaway.com, use the contact us. And if you say this is for John, because obviously it doesn't come to me first, but if you say this is for John, they all know to forward it to me directly, and I'll reply to you directly.
That's awesome. So outsourcinglever.com or onevaaway.com?
So onevaaway is where I realized a couple months ago that I have this really good recruiting process, and people's fear is, how do I know if I'm going to find someone good? And I don't have that fear. I know I'm going to find someone good. I'm like 80% success rate when I recruit someone. And I realized this is because I have a good recruiting process. So I laid out my entire recruiting process step by step, everything I could think of, and that's available at onevaaway.com. Man,
John, I wish we had maybe a part 2, 3, and 4 on this, because I just know, especially right now, I got to be honest, I think the impact of this is going to be huge to our listening base, because, here, obviously, we've got, with the pandemic, we've got people learning and discussing the PPP program and how do they keep people employed and all of the things that they're working on and doing. And so this potentially for them might be a business saving option.
Yeah. I mean, when I realized in the beginning, so this salary that I'm paying is tax deductible. And it's not it's reportable on my taxes, but it's not, I don't have any reporting to make for it. I don't send a 1099. I don't have a W-2. I don't have anything.
So how do you do that then? They're not a contractor?
They're a subcontract. On my taxes, we list it as a line item, subcontractors. We pay it. But since they're not in the U.S., you don't send a 1099 to them, because that doesn't make sense. The only thing we do for taxes, and I've had lots of accountants tell me this, you just need them to sign a W-8 BEN. And
W-8 BEN.
And that just certifies that they're not in the U.S. And that's it. And that's the end of it. So, there's no taxes to deal with. There's no lawsuits to deal with. There's no, regulations. You're not in the Philippines, so you don't have to deal with Philippines law. They're not in the U.S., so you don't have to deal with U.S. law. And yet it's still a tax deduction.
Yeah, right.
So it's a pretty good situation.
So good. Yeah. Guys, I know for a fact that everyone watching this will be one of our highest downloaded, highest viewed podcasts because of the topic. It is a couple weeks ago on our group coaching program that we have within Master Networks, a bunch of entrepreneurs literally said, what's the biggest thing on your mind right now? How to hire? How do I know when it's the right time to hire? How do I find them? Who do I hire? All of those things, because they're feeling it right now. I think we covered 95% of that just in this podcast alone.
You had some good questions.
Yeah, and so that was really where that came from today. So, guys, as you know, as we listen to John Jonas here today, as you know, every Monday, noon Central, on Master Network's Facebook page, I bring you successful entrepreneurs who are going to share with you their secrets, their successes, also the struggles, the things that they learned, because I believe most entrepreneurs learn the most from those struggles, not necessarily just the successes. And again, we heard that today from John. So make sure you subscribe to it so you're here every week to hear these entrepreneurs. And again, if you want to learn more, go to outsourcing. I can't even read my own writing. Outsourcinglever.com, onevaaway.com, or your website is onlinejobs.ph. John, total pleasure of mine to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for being our guest.
Thanks for having me. It's been great. I've enjoyed it.
Guys, as always, we'll see you next Monday, noon Central, on the Connect, Share, Prosper podcast. Till then, be well.
Stop hoping for your business to grow and start mastering the formula for success that every entrepreneur needs to grow their business. Join us for 5+1 Mastery, where every week we go in depth on how to grow your business the right way. Learn more at 5+1mastery.com.